Hello class, today we are looking at the effects of heat, acid, salt, and starch, flours, on milk protein stabilities. So I have my first pot here, and my first experiment is going to be milk and heat. So I am going to heat up, turn my element on, and I am going to heat up a 1/4 cup of milk in the pot. Now, I normally like to use 3.25% milk, homogenized, but I do not have that at in my house at the moment. So we are going to try the experiment with 2% and see how that turns out. Okay, so we have a 1/4 cup of milk in the saucepan placed over heat, and we're going to slowly boil. So before the milk started to boil, the plain milk had a glossy, smooth, and a little bit of a sour smell. Now that the milk is boiling, starting to boil, I'm noticing a film. There seems to be a film. So I'm just gonna jot down my observations here. So there is a film on the surface, and I'm noticing that the milk color is starting to look a little dull. The film looks like something you could almost peel off. And it looks like the texture looks to be a little bit watery-like. It looks like it's getting a little bit porous in the consistency as well. So now we're going to add a little bit of vinegar now that it is heated. And we're gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes. So now I'm just going to add my vinegar. So it calls for 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Okay, and now I'm gonna remove this off the heat, and we're gonna put the timer on for about 5 minutes. So we notice that casein, which is the milk protein, is coagulated, it becomes clotted by the action of the acid. So I've added the acid in, which is the vinegar, and it seems to be becoming a little bit clotted-like, almost curd-like. So the acid is making it become curd, the texture is like curd-like. So I would say the appearance looks lumpy, and it also looks like it's a little bit dull-like, a little yellow in color. So I've made a note of that. So low pH causes casein to become unstable, causing coagulation. So you'll notice that this is the casein curd making. So the next experiment that we're doing is the buffering action of starch on milk after the acid has been added. So in my saucepan, I have a 1/4 cup of milk. I have a tablespoon of vinegar and a tablespoon of flour. So I'm just going to mix that all together. And in this experiment, we're not going to place it over heat. We're going to set the timer and see what happens in about 5 minutes. I'm just mixing it all together and taking the lumps out. The flour is acting as a buffer and is taking all of the lumps out. So what I'm noticing right now is that the mixture is starting to thicken a little bit. The color is looking a little bit more white than the previous experiment with the vinegar on the stovetop, where that one was a little more yellow-like. Now there does seem to be a film around the outside of the pan. And the next experiment is salt. So I have added a 1/4 cup of milk to the saucepan and added in a tablespoon of salt. So we're gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes and see how it reacts. So our salt and milk experiment, I have noted that it's becoming a little porous-like, and the smell, it's not as sour as the other experiments. The consistency, it's pretty watery-like, but definitely the smell is not as potent as the vinegar smell. So just to recap, protein coagulates when heated. Coagulation is the change to the structure of the protein from a liquid to a solid brought on by heat. So an example of coagulation is eggs, right? Coagulation and denaturation. So when you're cooking eggs, they're in a liquid form and they change to a solid form. You'll also see a lot of denaturation in cooking meats, for example. So the form of the meat changes when it is cooked.